Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into this fascinating story of a super powerful ancient leader. This guy built a kingdom, he founded a dynasty, he was known all over the world. So what's the mystery? Well, it's why history's most important record basically says he was the worst. So let's just start with a really big question, right? What actually makes a leader great? Is it just about how much power they have, the stability they bring, the riches they pile up? Or is there something more to it? Okay, so think about it like this. Imagine a king who steps in, unifies a broken nation, builds a huge new capital city, and founds a dynasty that's gonna last. That's the classic resume, right? The blueprint for a successful ruler. By pretty much any measure, you'd call that greatness. And that's where we hit the big puzzle. How can a king who checks all those boxes, who is so successful by those standards, be called the absolute worst of all in history's most influential book? It just doesn't add up. All right, let's get into it. All right, to really get a handle on this king, a guy named Omri, you first have to understand the total and complete chaos he walked into. We're talking about the northern kingdom of Israel, and believe me, it was a nation literally tearing itself apart. This was a time of just insane instability. Power was here one day, gone the next. And violence, that was the fast track to getting it. The throne wasn't really a seat of power. It was more like a giant target painted on your back. And get this, one king, this guy Zimri, he lasted just 7 days before he was assassinated. That pretty much says it all, doesn't it? So, out of all this chaos, the kingdom splits in two. Half the people are behind a guy named Tibni, and the other half, they're backing this powerful army commander, Omri. What happens next? A really brutal civil war. But in the end, it's Omri's side that comes out on top. He completely crushes his rival, stops the fighting, and takes the throne. For the first time in a long time, the kingdom is united again. So Omri's now in charge. But here's the thing. He wasn't content to just win the war. No, he immediately started building something bigger, a legacy. He was basically the architect of a powerful modern state. And he had this brilliant 4-step playbook. It actually looked a lot like what other great nation builders like the famous King David had done. Step 1, unify the nation. Check. Step 2, build a brand new capital city to be the heart of it all. And from there, he could lock in his dynasty and really make a name for himself on the world stage. You know how David had Jerusalem? Well, Omri did something very similar. He went out, bought this perfectly strategic, easy-to-defend hill, and built a whole new capital city from scratch. He called it Samaria. And just like that, the northern kingdom had its very own center for power, for trade, for its whole identity. It was a fortress city that would last for generations. And his influence wasn't just inside his own borders. Oh no, he put Israel on the map big time. He became so powerful, so well-known, that for decades after he died, the massive Assyrian Empire, the superpower of the day, didn't even call the kingdom Israel anymore. In their official records, they called it the House of Omri. Think about that. His name literally became the name of the nation. So let's tally up the score. If you're grading Omri on, say, a worldly report card, he's getting straight A's. He ended a civil war. He unified the nation. He built a capital. He started a powerful dynasty, the one that would eventually include the very famous, or infamous, King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. By any worldly standard you can think of, this guy was a huge success. But then we turn to the biblical account in the Book of Kings. And the verdict there? It's shocking. It's brutal. And it's completely different. The Bible gives him zero credit for any of his political wins. Nothing about ending the civil war. Not a word about building the great city of Samaria. Instead, you get this one short, ice-cold, devastating sentence. It says he did more evil than everyone who came before him. That's it. That's the entire summary of his whole reign. So you gotta ask, why? How can the same person be seen as this incredible success and, at the same time, a total failure? Well, the answer is pretty simple, actually. It's because the world and the Bible were using two completely different scorecards. And this just lays out the central conflict perfectly. On one hand, you've got the world's scorecard. It's all about what you can see on the outside. Power, stability, wealth, the big buildings you leave behind. But then you have the Bible's scorecard. And that's all about what's on the inside. Faithfulness to God, justice, humility, obedience. The world was looking at his political strength, but the Bible was looking at his soul. So to the biblical writers, all of his worldly success just didn't matter. It was completely irrelevant. Why? Because from their perspective, he failed the only test that counted. He actively led the entire nation away from God, promoting the worship of what they called worthless idols. So yeah, he built a stable, prosperous kingdom, but he built it on a foundation they saw as spiritually rotten to the core.
And if you want to see how this works in the complete opposite direction, just look at King Josiah, who came along a few centuries later. On the world's scorecard, this guy was a total disaster. He started a war he couldn't win, died foolishly in battle at just 39, and basically led his nation right into being conquered. But on the Bible's scorecard, he's one of the greatest heroes because he found God's law again and led the people in this huge spiritual comeback. His heart, you see, was in the right place, even if his military tactics weren't.
So that brings us back to Omri. Whatever happened to his great dynasty? The one that was so famous that other nations named the country after him. The legacy he worked so hard to build. Well, what was the final result? The biblical story describes a collapse that is just terrifyingly fast and unbelievably brutal. His son Ahab is killed in a bloody battle. His daughter-in-law, the famous Jezebel, is thrown from a window and her body is eaten by dogs. And then, in one single horrifying day, all 70 of his grandsons are rounded up and executed. The message from the biblical writers is clear. A dynasty built on worldly power but spiritual corruption just can't last. For all its might, for all its fame, the great house of Omri was completely and utterly wiped from the face of the earth. Annihilated. So the story of Omri, this king, who you could say won the world, but was condemned by the word, it really forces us to wrestle with a tough question. What truly defines a successful legacy? Is it measured by the monuments we build, the power we hold, or is it measured by the values we live by and the faith we pass on to the next generation? That's the question his story leaves hanging in the air for all of us.